Welcome back. You're listening to Risk Required, the series and book all about the inside track to finance, the tips and tricks that could allow you to find financial freedom and retire from the 9 to 5. I'm Ed Pitford, and this week I'll be answering some of your questions. The information and opinions in this podcast are provided for informational and educational purposes only and do not constitute financial advice. The presenter, production and publisher are not responsible or liable for any analysis made by the audience based on the information in this recording. No parties warrant or guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information. Audiences should always do their own research or consult an independent financial advisor who will advise based on the individual's specific circumstances. Before we get started, if you have any questions that you'd like answered, send them in to us on Instagram @RiskRequired or wherever you listen to your podcasts. The first question I've been asked is for 3 practical, easy things you can do to increase your wealth. So obviously the first one I think is spend less, which seems kind of like I'm kind of cheating and getting out of the question a bit there. But that is one of the really, really important things. When you're looking at spending £50, that is £50 after tax. So really it's kind of, you have to earn £70, £80 to get that 50. And also you should see that as not just spending £50, but you're losing the opportunity to invest that and make money on that £50. So I see that as £5 a year that you're also spending and losing. So it's really about tightening up and making sure that you're not spending excessively. The second one is invest. Just start investing. It locks up your money. So when, even if you could sell the shares same day and have that money back, the fact that it's invested makes you mentally think you don't have that money anymore. It's not sat in your current account and available to spend, as it were. So you don't feel as rich and you don't go out on a massive spending spree. But also that money will be making money and it will start to be building this picture. A really, I guess, important point here is this book and the podcast is not about making loads of money in 1 year. This will take a decade. But by putting all these things in place, you're starting that growth that wouldn't happen if you didn't do them. So spend less, invest. And then another one that I was thinking about that I did probably almost 10 years ago now is negotiate your household bills. Now this is super uncomfortable, especially for us Brits, but I was at business school at the time and I was doing a course on negotiation, and part of our homework was to go and do a real world negotiation. So I rang up my broadband provider and started negotiating the fee, and it was amazing how much I could knock off just by asking. Kind of frustrating in a way, because if it's possible to do it for that cheap, why are they not doing it for that cheap? Why do I have to ring them up? And now I find I have to ring them up roughly every 18 months to renegotiate and get that back down to where they can do it and probably still make a profit. And it's not just your broadband, it's your mobile phone, it's your water bills. So if you're in a block of flats and you're not individually metered, and it's probably going to be difficult to individually meter, you can call up the water company, ask them for the meter. If they can't do it, then they have to put you on a deemed tariff, and that can take 40% or something off your water bill. 3 things there of spend less, invest, and negotiate. The next question is, when should you get an accountant? This can be quite difficult, very, very subjective. But so I got an accountant probably, the first time I ever had one was when I was working abroad for Tesco, and so they'd sent me abroad, and because of the complications that added to my tax return, they offered up an accountant to do that for me. That was a kind of one-time thing, and then I went back to doing it myself after that. The next time I got an accountant was when the tax return got a little bit complicated. I'd invested in a limited partnership based in Canada using US dollars on a financial year that was a calendar year and therefore didn't match the financial year of the tax return. So all of that, I was kind of feeling a bit lost and asked an accountant to help me. And they started a reasonable fee. It was probably about 600 quid, but it kind of could have been worse. But you still have to do all the work and you still have to compile all the papers, which is the bulk of the pain of doing a tax return. And then they're just the one plugging it into the system. So I think if you know what you're doing, never get an accountant. But it got complicated, so I asked them to do it. They did it for a year, 2 years, and I could kind of see what they were doing. And also then they tried to put their rate up, trying to double their rate. And that was the point where I said, actually, I'll do it myself again and come back to it. And if you're looking at that as an hourly rate, they're doubling their rate. That's £1,200, probably a 2-hour job, 3-hour job. So £600, £400 an hour. It's unlikely that you're going to be earning that much, and therefore the opportunity cost, you're better off doing it yourself. HMRC have made it really easy. The website for doing this is pretty intuitive. If you got your calculations wrong, then it doesn't let you go forward to the next point. So really, really worth, I think, doing it yourself as long as possible. A kind of related question to that is, when do you get a financial advisor? In an ideal world, never, because you can research all the stuff yourself. But if you're overloaded, if your day job is taking up so much time that you really just don't have time to do it, fine, get a financial advisor. But beware, they take a lot of fees generally. They could take a couple of % a year on your money, and also percentage every time they do something, regardless of how well it does. So financial advisors can be super expensive, but that doesn't mean to say that they won't earn their keep. Sometimes they'll advise investments that you hadn't thought of, you didn't know existed, that will do so much better than anything you were looking at. So they do have a place, but I don't have one, and I kind of advocate for doing as much research yourself and making investments yourself, and then not paying what can be very high fees. You're listening to Risk Required. The next section is, what have I been investing in this week? This isn't an advertisement for you to go out and invest in the same stuff. I want to make that very clear. It's just some people are interested in what I'm up to with my finances. And the fact that I've gone in does not mean that they're going to go up. And the fact that I've gone in and they've gone up already does not mean that they'll continue to go up. So very much don't copy this, but it's just for interest of what I'm up to. This week, I invested in Abeona Therapeutics. This is a stock on the stock market. It's a very small company, so it's very volatile. They have a drug coming out that is up for FDA approval soon. Classic, very high risk option. So I was doing this with money that I could afford to lose, but in the hope that it will fly and I'll do very well. That is what it's doing so far. It's up 80% this month, and we still haven't had that announcement. The analyst targets, they're targeting a price over double where it's at the moment. While this is basically a complete punt, I did my own research on it, having been recommended it by a friend. So I didn't blindly follow what they told me to do, but having looked at some of the fundamentals, it looked interesting. And I feel, do enough investments like this, enough of them will come good, that'll make up for the ones of them that don't come good, and where you lose your money. I'm not there scouring the market for these opportunities. This was something a friend mentioned to me in passing, and it sounded interesting, so I thought, why not have a punt? I don't want to give the impression that I'm spending my days scouring through this stuff, but it sounded good, and there were some good underlying reasons why this might be an interesting bet. And I use the word bet there, which I think kind of sums up what this kind of investment is. Probably closer to the gambling end of the spectrum than the savings account end of the spectrum. Right, and now back to some of the questions. The next question is what to invest in if you want a better return than a savings account. And that is, pretty much anything other than a savings account. But I'm assuming the person asking that wants to know about something reasonably safe that's just a tiny bit better than a savings account. A first step might be to get a cash ISA instead of a savings account, which is effectively a savings account, but you don't pay any tax on that interest. I'd hope you're not keeping so much in a savings account that the interest really is that taxable. A cash ISA is a good first step of moving towards a tiny bit more risk. Term deposits is another option. So banks offer effectively savings accounts where you can't take your money out for 6 months or a year or 2 years, and they give a slightly better rate because you've agreed not to take your money out. So there's another option there, and that is effectively as safe as a savings account because that's covered by FCS rules. So unless you're putting more than 80,000 in, your money's safe because it's backed up by the government. The next kind of level of risk, and this is probably what I'd advise if you've got, 5,000 in a savings account, or even 1,000 in a savings account, is to put it into a stocks and shares ISA. So this is effectively just putting your money into the main stock markets, but because it's an ISA, you're not paying any tax on the gains or the dividends, and you can put up to £20,000 per year into one of these. So yes, you're taking a lot more risk in a savings account, but you're hopefully getting the market return if you spread your money out enough and not paying tax on that. So I think that's a good option, and you're keeping your money liquid. You can bring it back whenever you want, as long as the market's open. So 5 days a week from 8 till 4 p.m. roughly. If it's on the UK market, you can sell your shares and get that money back into your account within a few days, and then spend it on whatever you need to spend it on. So it's quite a good option where you don't want to tie your money up, but want to be exposed to the market and get a better return than a savings account. The next question is about pension contributions. So should I be maxing out my pension contributions at work? So quite often at work, you'll have to put in, 4% or 5%, 6% into your pension. And then the company might say, would you like to contribute another 4% or something? And that comes out of your pay before tax. So it looks like you're getting more money. I've got a few kind of cautionary reasons why I wouldn't do this. One is you may not be alive at pensionable age. It's sad, but true. People do die before they get to enjoy that nest egg. And linking that back to episode 1, so my father died when he was 58. So he had done all this saving for his golden retirement and didn't get to spend it. And I think that kind of leads me to want to enjoy the future a little bit more and don't rely on the fact that there might be this golden pension era of your life at the end of it. So enjoying the money now, or putting it into something and having the ability to have it in 5 or 10 years instead of 20 or 30, however long it is till you retire, could be a lot better. But also, I opened up my letter from the pension company recently, and they had made 2% in the year. Inflation was at 5% or something, so they've lost me 3% in real terms. And so if they're actually not growing that over the 40 years or whatever they hold it, that's pretty shocking. Whereas if I'd had the money and invested it myself, I could be making 10-20% a year on it and actually growing that. So yes, I'll be paying more tax on it, but that's tax on profit, and it's a lot better than just letting it slowly die while the big pension companies take fees on it. So yeah, I would advise not maxing out your pension contributions. Also, the flip side of that is if you're currently in debt, if you've got credit card debt at 30-40%, you don't want to be paying into that pension to save a bit of tax in the future. You want to be using that money to pay off that credit card and not racking that up again. So pay off the credit card, but cut your spending at the same time. Don't use it to pay off your credit card so that you can then go and spend more, because then you will end up in a worse place. But definitely, if you've got high expensive credit card debt, you shouldn't be maxing out your pension contributions. You should ask to cut that down and use that to pay off your debt. You're listening to Risk Required. The next section, we're going to have a deeper dive into people's personal stories. And this first one I absolutely love. It's kind of why I've been doing this, but someone got in touch saying, I listened to your podcast and I borrowed some money off a credit card and invested it. And they asked how much they borrowed, a few £1,000, £4,000 to be precise, and asked them what rate they'd got. And they said it was a 0% but with a 3% fee. I was like, that sounds all right. And I did it for 6 months. And I was like, oh, that's quite a short time to try and get an investment that is 3% for 6 months, that's 6% for a year. After tax, they're going to need like a good 9% returning investment to cover that. So I got a little bit nervous. But it was a great news story. So they'd invested that in the stock. The stock had an amazing day. A few stocks, but one of them really shot up. So they turned that £4,000 into £6,500 within a month. So I'm now a lot less worried about their ability to pay that off at the end of the 6 months. Whilst that is at the crazy high risk end of the spectrum, it's really, really exciting to see it working, to see people who didn't have a lot borrowing, investing, having more, and then they can use that to invest and get more and more and more. Lovely to hear that story, and please do keep them coming in. Okay, the next question is a little tricky. Someone really testing my abilities here. So they asked about upcoming mortgage rates. Who knows what's going to happen. It looks like they're going to stay roughly where they are for a year or two, and then slowly go down as the Bank of England reduce the base rate. Where they're at the moment, I probably wouldn't be locking in a long-term deal. So if you're offering like a 5-year fix, I'd probably avoid that. I'd probably go for the 2-year fix or something, just because I feel like the trajectory is down, and therefore locking in now wouldn't make complete sense. That got me thinking about, yes, mortgage rates are high, but you should still be able to beat that rate with your investments. So a friend the other day was, they're looking at getting a new house and they're getting a mortgage for it, and they said that they would only have to borrow £150,000 or whatever it was. And I said, no, you should borrow as much as you can and then invest that extra that you have. And they're like, oh no, mortgage rates are high, I'm not going to be able to beat that, which that being the mortgage rate plus tax effectively. So if they're paying 40% tax and the rate's about 5%, then kind of they're going to need to get 8 or 9% on their investments, which sounds tough, but I believe that they could do it. And that brings me on to venture capital trusts as a good way of getting quite a high investment return, hopefully. Obviously, things can go down as well as up, but venture capital trusts, to me, are kind of a really good beginner level investment. So they've got a few downsides. So you've got to lock your money up for 5 years. Some people may not want to do that. They might want the cash within 5 years. But 5 years in the grand scheme of things is not that long a period. It will go by in a flash. So you have to lock your money up for 5 years. But the minimum investment on these is not too high, kind of £1,000, £3,000, no more than that. So you can put that money in. So say you put £1,000 in your next tax return, the government will give you £300 back, assuming you've paid that in tax, in UK tax. Then that £1,000 you've invested, the target return on these is normally around 5% a year, but that is tax-free. So dividends and capital gains on venture capital trusts are tax-free. So your £1,000 should be increasing at roughly 5% a year after tax, plus you've got the 30% from the government that you can also invest. So the total return on these things, you're looking at about 12% before the effect of inflation. And it's also that 30% tax break is similar to the tax break you get on EIS that we talked about in the last episode. But this, you spread your money across about 50 companies normally in a venture capital trust. So you've massively reduced your risk by spreading it out. So these I've recommended to my mum, I've done them myself, and I know the valuations are not great at the moment in the venture capital world, but in my mind that means it's probably not a bad time to get in, because in 5 years' time that market should have recovered and the value on these things will hopefully have increased, and there'll be some tax-free capital gains to add into your return there. And also with these, you'll find that because they don't want to hold cash in the venture capital trust, when they get returns by selling companies or companies floating, they'll dividend out that cash to you. So it's not that you put your £1,000 in and then don't get any money until the end of the 5 years. You should be getting a kind of half yearly or yearly dividend in cash of that roughly 5% return. And that money that came from the government, that's also in cash. So yes, you're putting £1,000 that's locked up for 5 years, but you will, in the first year, hopefully get kind of 350 quid back in cash that you can then spend on what you need to spend it on or invest. So the next question is renting just throwing away your money, or isn't renting just throwing away your money? No, is my answer to this. And I know it's kind of a really, really common thought in the British psyche that we should all be buying our homes and renting is bad and you're just giving your money to someone else. But if you look at the returns on buy-to-let at the moment, they're not great. There's a lot of regulation for these people who own the buy-to-let properties to adhere to, and the cost of maintaining them and just running that property, all the fees they're paying to the estate agents, the taxes they're paying if it's unoccupied for a period of time, all of that adds up, that the return on renting it out isn't actually that great, and they could be making a lot more money elsewhere investing in small businesses. So that's kind of what I always go for. But if you're the renter, they're taking the brunt of that pain, and when something breaks, you just ask them to come and fix it. When you own the property, you're the one who has to fix it. But also as a renter, you've not tied your money up in that property. So yes, you're having to pay out, I don't know what it is, £1,000, £2,000 a month to rent this place. But that means that the savings you have that you could be using for a deposit on a house, you can actually invest in businesses that will get a much, much better return than the property market, and hopefully a better return than the property market plus any income from renting out a property. And you can, as I was just talking about, put it into things like venture capital trusts and get the tax breaks. The returns should easily exceed buying property. So you're not throwing money away at all when you rent. You're giving yourself the opportunity to invest your assets somewhere else, higher returning than property. And so economically, we would all just rent because it doesn't make sense to tie up your money. But I get that there is a kind of mental side to this, the security of having your own home, being able to decorate it how you want, make it your space, know that no one can throw you out of it. There's the emotional side to it, which is good reasons to buy homes, but financially, you're not throwing your money away. The caveat to that is making sure that you're not overreaching on the quality of the place you're living. So those comparisons all work if you're going to buy or rent the same quality. But what tends to happen is because people are paying monthly, they kind of creep up a little bit what they can afford and end up living in a much nicer place than they could necessarily afford if they were buying. And that lifestyle inflation starts to impact them. So it's not throwing your money away as long as you're not overreaching in terms of the quality of the place that you're choosing to live in. That's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions you'd like answered, send them in to us on Instagram @RiskRequired or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll be back to answer more of your questions in 2 weeks' time.